afternoon, and thanks for stopping by Across the Fence. I'm Jolie Whitney. March 3rd through 7th is Consumer Protection Week. In Vermont, consumer protections is handled by the Office of the Vermont Attorney General and the Consumer Assistance Program, or CAP, housed at the University of Vermont. And to talk about this, I'd like to welcome back to the program Charity Clark, Vermont's Attorney General. And let's start off on a positive note. A caller called in after seeing your last program with Across the Fence, and she said that not only was it very positive, but very informative. So thank you for coming back and telling us more that we should look out for.
That's great feedback. Thank you for having me.
And let's start with how helpful your office really has been. Tell me a little bit about the numbers. How much money have you saved Vermonters?
At the Consumer Assistance Program, well, we are very proud. Our report, our annual report has come out, and it's $2 million.
Wow.
So we are really proud of the work that we're doing. And that, runs the gamut, saving people from scams, working with people who have complaints against businesses and kind of mediating those complaints. So yeah, it's a lot of money, and we're really proud of the work.
All right, and let's zoom out a little bit. There's been a lot of tension between the federal government and states recently. So what have you been hearing from Vermonters?
Well, it's interesting. I just got a thank you note yesterday. It literally says thank you, like an actual note card. People have been giving us a lot of positive feedback and a lot of thanks for the work that we're doing. Our job primarily is to make sure that the Trump administration, when they're implementing their vision for the country, they're not violating the Constitution or federal laws. We've been on the lookout for that because during the first Trump administration that happened a lot. So that's been taking up a lot of our time. Unfortunately, we have had to sue, I think, 5 times now for actions that violated the Constitution or federal statute.
Sure. Is there anything that stands out? What was your most recent suit?
Well, I think in terms of standing out, critically, at this point, we've saved tens of millions of dollars from being withheld illegally by the federal government. That was money that was earmarked to come to Vermont, whether it be through grants or to the University of Vermont, NIH, the National Institute of Health grants. And we have sued, there's a couple different lawsuits that impacted that, but we're really proud of the work that we're doing to make sure that that money comes to the state of Vermont as it rightfully should.
All right, that's incredible. And now let's talk a little bit about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which also covers a lot about scams. And that's one of the agencies that's recently been targeted by the Department of Government Efficiency, which is doing some cuts in the federal government to try and cut down on spending. And it's been recently shuttered, and staffers have been told to go home. So how does that affect consumer protection here in Vermont?
Unfortunately, it has a really big impact. Recall that the CFPB was created in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. For those who blocked that period out, it was a devastating time, and if the federal government hadn't come in and taken steps to protect the economy, I mean, we were truly in crisis. Literally, we call it a financial crisis, and it was very bad. And it really impacted consumers. I think sometimes consumers think, who am I? I'm just one person. It's big companies, it's big banks, they have all the power. But the truth is, our economy depends on consumers buying things, interfacing with the economy. If they don't have trust in the economy, and in the marketplace, the economy will suffer. And what we saw happen during the 2008 crisis was the system was not protecting consumers, and all of those subprime mortgages and the whole financial system that was based around that were incredibly harmful to the financial economy and eventually collapsed. After that, the CFPB was put in place to regulate the big banks, mortgage companies, help consumers, and provide that enforcement of federal law. I think at this point, the statistic that I've seen is that the CFPB has saved consumers $20 billion, which is a ton of money. So having them gone or diminished greatly is going to have, unfortunately, a big impact on consumers here in Vermont.
And if it is shut down, are other attorney generals and yourself kind of preparing to step in?
Well, we actually filed what's called a friend of the court brief, an amicus brief in Latin, to support the work of the CFPB. What we do here in Vermont is we also are protecting consumers along with the Department of Financial Regulation here in Vermont. They have that financial arm, so we kind of are in conversation with each other. We make referrals to each other. So yeah, that's another possibility, is that the work and the burden of doing that work is going to shift to the states. So while we might be saving money on the federal level, the states are going to have to do that work now. I also am always very mindful of the impact that consumer protection has on a healthy economy, because truly consumers need to feel safe before they buy something in the marketplace. I always think about that when people buy things online. I mean, we've all been to the sketchy website where it's like, I really want this thing, but I've never heard of them. Am I going to take the risk? That is a consumer having that experience of distrust and not buying something. We want people to buy things and feel comfortable in the marketplace. That makes for a healthy economy. So I always get nervous when we strip away consumer protections, because I think it seems like a good idea in the short term to some people, but in the long run, it's not good for the economy.
And even if this federal program gets shut down, you can still rely on consumer protections from the state, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, our consumer assistance program will definitely continue. We are totally separate. We are, governed by the Attorney General. That's a partnership between our office and the University of Vermont that's been in place for over 40 years.
Not going anywhere.
No, it's not going anywhere. And of course, I used to work there, so it's very near and dear to my heart. And we help literally thousands of Vermonters every year with a variety of consumer type complaints, and they do incredible, important work. Every time I speak to a group about consumer issues or scams, I always say, has anyone here ever called the Attorney General's office of the Consumer Assistance Program with a consumer issue? And invariably, someone will raise their hand and they will say, I had a positive experience. So it's a really important program.
That's great. Now let's talk about some of the scams that you've been following in your most recent report. And we mentioned the CFPB and kind of purchasing. So are a lot of the scams we're seeing sales related?
When it comes to scams, the scammers are going to do whatever's effective at stealing your money. So they always vary. So over the years, you kind of will hear of a scam and then it'll go away because everyone gets kind of hip to the scam, and it's like, no, you're not going to fool me. So we kind of see everything change as it goes. Scams that are really effective are the scams that use an imposter philosophy. So they're going to pretend they're someone they're not, whether it be a relative, law enforcement, or the one that I always am afraid of, the computer tech support scam. That one I think is number one right now, and it's unfortunately very effective. So people should be on the lookout for people trying to steal their money by saying they have a computer virus or something like that.
And we wanted to highlight 3. We don't have time for all 10 today, but we wanted to highlight the home improvement one. Does that stop when the weather gets colder?
So these are more complaints rather than scams. It's a legitimate business here in Vermont, could be, or in the country, rather than scammers who are overseas and hard to track down. But the complaints that we see are from businesses frequently where there's a lot of money at stake. So we see, auto complaints, home improvement complaints, because when you're building a deck, that's thousands of dollars, and you're not just going to let things slide. You're going to want to say, I think this is a problem, and I need to call someone about it. So those are the big kind of money complaints. And then a third one I wanted to highlight is propane. Vermont has robust consumer protection laws when it comes to propane. Not surprisingly, we are a rural state. Many people use propane for heat, and of course you need heat to survive. It's fundamental. When we get a complaint involving propane at the Consumer Assistance Program, one person stops everything they're doing and focuses on that complaint and does it as long as it takes. Could be an entire day to resolve and make sure that person's heat is hooked back up and they get their heat restored. But I want to highlight something about the home improvement arena specifically, because we have a home improvement specialist at the Consumer Assistance Program. He used to be a paralegal and he used to be a contractor, so he really knows his stuff, and he has been extremely effective at helping resolve complaints between home contractors, home improvement specialists, and consumers. So he's been in the office. We hired him. Thankfully, the legislature created that position like a year and a half ago. I think he's saved consumers $800,000 so far.
Wow.
So if any of your viewers are having a problem relating to home improvement, they should contact our Consumer Assistance Program at 1-800-649-2424 for a little help. And by the way, that includes the home improvement contractor themselves. They might be having a problem getting paid or something, and we can provide mediation services in that context.
Sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes it sounds like it's more of a misunderstanding than someone being fraudulent.
Yeah, sometimes it is. And one of the things that was put in place at the time that position was created was a requirement to have a contract, to get insurance if you are a contractor who has a job that's worth, I think it's $10,000. But I always say, have a contract anyway, because it helps to create an expectation on both sides.
Absolutely. And another one we mentioned very briefly was car purchases, and that can be a really stressful experience
Yes.
to go through. So what specifically do those complaints look like?
Well, a car is the most expensive thing you buy, right? They're incredibly expensive. If there is a misunderstanding or if the car doesn't work as you're expected, of course you're going to call and make a complaint. That continues to be, our number one complaint because we get so many of them because the cars are so expensive. So if you need assistance with that, please contact our office. Now, you're reminding me that I wanted to do a social media post when I had to buy a new car. My car was 10 years old and I wanted to buy a new car, and I thought I should write about this because I'm doing it the right way. I had a tote bag, I had my water, all of my information, I had written down this is my budget. There's steps you can take before you go in to make this big purchase because it is a really big purchase and you want to make sure you're getting the right thing for you. So we have tips for that as well if you're buying a new car.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So is that looking at dealership, private sale, everything?
Yeah, everything. I mean, it's such a huge decision that you have to make. Many people need to finance the car, so you have to think about what your budget is, how long is your lease or your loan if you have to get a loan, kind of working that out in advance. I think I literally brought a calculator. I know I have one on my phone, but I was just like, I'm just going to be ready for anything. I brought a snack. I don't want to be hungry. We definitely get complaints where in the auto context where the person was hungry. That was like an element of their story. This car doesn't work as expected. I felt pressured and I was hungry, and so I was like, I remembered that, and I brought a snack in my tote bag.
Good advice.
So I was ready.
And we're almost out of time, but I just want to ask, like we said, the annual report is scheduled to come out really soon. So is there anything else you want to highlight in that?
I would just say that there are so many tips that the Consumer Assistance Program has. If you have a question about a particular consumer issue, it might not be in the annual report, but we have a blog called CAP Connection. And if you go on the Attorney General's website, you can find that, or you can just Google, Vermont CAP Connection. I bet you'll find it. That's what I do when I need something. Look in the search bar, just type in whatever you're worried about, whatever you need, and there are tons of great articles that will kind of provide an overview, and always feel you can reach out and contact our office as well.
All right, great. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And if you have a consumer complaint or you'd like to read the CAP annual report, you can visit the Vermont Attorney General's website, and that link is on your screen. And that takes care of our show for today. My thanks to the crew behind the scenes here at WCAX. I'm Jolie Whitney. This is Across the Fence. Have a good one.